Um, my name is Rick Williams. This is my wife Lynn, and we just want to share about the love and power of God that was manifested in my life. I'm going to have a hard time with
You
this.
can't tell this without crying, so
Yeah.
you'll just have to
But
deal with
in
that.
March of 2011, I slipped off of a roof and shattered my heel and broke my hip, and was, of course, rushed to the hospital. And the hospital I was taken to said they could not fix me, so I was taken to a teaching hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina, and became under the care of what we were told was one of the best physicians, orthopedic physicians in Charlotte. After going through surgery, he told me my long-term prognosis, which was basically that I would never fully recover from my injuries, that I would deal with pain, and as I grew older, arthritis, and just continued difficulties in functioning.
It was bad. It was bad news.
It was bad news. And as a result, I lost my job of 20 years because I could not do the physical requirements of the job as a working superintendent in construction. So I went through, I don't know how long, rehab, and then was without a job for over a year. But due to my injuries, I was told, like I say, I couldn't return to my current job. I was not allowed to get on ladders or scaffolding or stand on sloped surfaces, and was not allowed to carry over 30 pounds, which I thought was, kind of ridiculous. But after trying it, I realized that, I could lift 30 pounds, but I could not move. So, where do I go from here? Anyway, I quickly learned that it was going to be a difficult transition. I could not do a lot of the things that I had done for years. I had trouble just walking around the block with my wife, walking in stores for any length of time. I would come out limping, and
Well, you went in limping too.
Yeah,
You were just limping all the time.
but in pain constantly, and I had trouble climbing stairs, any of that kind of thing. So anyway,
Well, about every 6 months, he would say to me that he wanted to have his foot amputated because we would see people with the hook, the prosthetic hook, and they could run and ski
Climb and
and
do anything.
do all kinds of
Yeah.
things that he couldn't do.
yeah.
But I would.
She would encourage me to believe that God would heal me, because we believed that,
Yeah,
even though in our 40 years as Christians we hadn't seen it.
ever.
But my options were, as the orthopedist told me, your options are to get the joint frozen, because I had limited mobility in my ankle. I actually have 9 screws below my ankle, and very little flexibility at all, and that's why I had the difficulty getting upstairs, and I had a hard time climbing hills. I had to walk sideways, and just the simple thing of having the sheet lay on my foot in bed, I couldn't. It was painful, so I would sleep with my foot outside the sheets. And my wife will attest to the fact that I constantly was making noises, because
'Cause he was
just
in pain
bumping
all the
into
time.
things or stepping on the smallest thing would cause me to crumble sometimes.
Kleenex.
And sometimes at work I would do things that I was not supposed to do, like take a couple steps up on a ladder, and the next morning I would be in so much pain that I would have to hold on to the walls to get started in the morning. And it took a while to get functioning. Anyway, this went on for a total of a little over 6 years. But during this time, in the fall of 2016, my wife, my wonderful wife, just got this intense hunger to see the miracles of God, and to see us walking in what Jesus had proclaimed we should
What
be
he
doing.
paid for.
What he paid for.
it.
He paid for our healing on the cross. He said, "It is finished." And there weren't any requirements to it. No, well, if you do this, then I will heal you. He paid for it. And so she started watching all these videos, and eventually came across this missionary in Mexico who was raising the dead and healing all kinds, seeing healings of all kinds. And that was his life. He fasted every other day. He spent the first hour of every day in prayer and the scriptures and just seeking God. And at first he turned me off because he was so confident in God. And then I saw an interview with and this is David Hogan, is the missionary. Saw an interview with him and Heidi Baker, who I greatly respected. And I saw his heart for God and for people. And so I just started watching his videos. And it just started building my faith to believe that, this could happen to me. Because I was tired of not being able to do things with my family. My family loved hiking and things like that, and I would take them, my wife and daughter, to go hiking in the mountains, and I would have to sit in my vehicle and read a book because I could not climb. And so anyway, I watched one video where he shared the testimony of this Muslim girl who came to him and said, "I don't want your Jesus, but I want him to heal me." And at first he said, I really didn't want to pray for her, but Jesus said, pray for her and I will heal her. And so he prayed for her. She went out under the Spirit of God. And when she got up, she was completely healed, and actually the steel had been removed from her body. And of course, she gave her heart to Jesus. So when I watched that, I realized that, because I had grown up with this performance mentality where, do good, get good. You gotta, do these things to receive the love of God. And through that, I saw that, no, there's no requirements. He loves us so much. If we would just believe him. And so, anyway, so a short time later, I had this vision, and I saw myself running, which I had not been able to do in 6 years. And so I thought, wow, that's really cool. And so the next day at work, I tried under my own strength to run, and it was a miserable attempt. And in a lot of pain afterward and just had to rest for a long time. But that encouraged me too. And then we went to see a friend who's a worship leader, and was telling her about David Hogan, and she said, well, he's going to be at this church in Moravian Falls, North Carolina next month, which is a small church. I mean, it's a great, awesome church full of, believers that love God, and so we thought, we will be there. We wanted to see this guy in person. And so when that time came, and I have to share that during my wife's just search for, to see God do, the miracles and things that he'd spoken of, she just poured herself into just going after the Lord and reading the scriptures and praying. And she went on a 40-day fast. And so then we found out he was coming to this church, and so we went there, and it was a Friday night. And he ministered and shared testimonies, and at the end he said, I'd like all the incurables to come forward. And I just sat there. When we got there, I took my shoes off because I was in pain, and because when my hip had healed, it shortened my leg, so I also wore an insert to keep me from limping really bad. And so I was sitting there and with my shoes off, and my wife's like, that's you, get up there, because I was thinking, cancer and stuff like that. So I went forward, and I just watched him. I loved the way he prayed for people, because he was just so genuine. It was not a religious thing with him, not a showy thing. He just said, what is it, what you need, what do you need, baby, what do you need from Jesus? And a lot of times all he would do is just touch people and say Jesus, and that was his prayer, because that's all we need, because it's been done for us. And so he got to me and he says, there's something you need from the Lord? And I said yes. And he didn't ask any specifics. And there were several other people, and he just kind of gave us all kind of a group hug and just Jesus, and moved on. And so a few minutes later, I felt and heard a loud pop in my leg. And after I'd broken or shattered my heel, which basically it exploded, was how the doctor described it, and broken my hip, I also broke my knee. I had an issue with falling, it seemed like. So anyway, I had complications from that. And so I felt and heard that loud pop, and then a few minutes later, I actually felt strength come into my leg. And so I got excited, and I thought, wow, something's really happening here. And then I started raising up on my toes, which was something very difficult to do with my ankle the way it was. And so that was feeling good, and I thought, well, it's time to try this thing out, because I knew he was healing me. And so I went back to the seat. My wife had her eyes closed and her head bowed, and I took my insert and threw it on the floor. I put my tennis shoes on, and I went outside to the front of the church. And I ran for the first time in 6 years. And so I just, ran the whole distance of the church, and I went in, and Lynn looked up at me and she goes, something happened? Something good happened? And I said, yes. And so I shared with her, and then we went back we were staying with some friends who lived on a mountainside in this little cabin. And I got out and I ran through loose gravel, which would have been excruciating for me, and ran through this soft mulch, next to their house and actually jumped up on their porch. All of these things I could not do before. I went inside and I ran up and down their stairs 4 times. And I had trouble just walking upstairs. I would have to lead with my good leg. And if I was carrying anything upstairs, I would have to sit it ahead of me and walk up to it and then move it. So I did that, and then I I started kicking my foot against the wall. You know, which, you know, was crazy, but it, you know, it would have been torture before this happened. So I knew that I was healed, but the next day, of course, and that night, I couldn't lay in bed with my ankles touching each other
Before you got healed.
before I got healed. And that night, for the first time since my injury, I laid my heels together and I had a great night's sleep. And then, so the next day we got to the church and I couldn't use my handicap placard
Right.
anymore, you know.
Couldn't park in the handicap.
Couldn't park in the handicap. I had to walk through the gravel parking lot. And then I just ran to the building, and then my wife, she said, let's get this on video. We need to show our kids. And so my son said, you know, when he saw it, of course, it brought him to tears, and because they'd seen what I'd went through for years. And he goes, you're like a dog jumping out of a car. You just got to take off running. And so I did that for the next couple of days. And then on Sunday, he went to minister in Charlotte, North Carolina. David Hogan. So we went there and shared our testimony with our old pastor. And then afterward, we went to my brother-in-law's, who lived on his driveway was like this. And whenever we went to their house, we would have to pull around to the side of the house and go around back, or I would have to walk up his driveway sideways to get to the house, and it would take a while. That day, and I actually wore cowboy boots it was my favorite shoes before I got injured. I put those on for the first time that morning, because I wasn't able to put them on because of the restriction of my ankle, the inflexibility. I slipped them on, went to church, and my wife's going, hey, run in those boots and show people how you're healed. I said, you can't run in cowboy boots. You know, that's difficult. They are difficult. But when we went to their house, I actually ran up and down their driveway in cowboy boots. And then a week later, she and I went walking in the mountains. Took an easy slope path, but I was able to do it. I climbed up on boulders and jumped off. And then a week after that, I went with my daughter, who loved hiking, and I climbed, it's called Crowder Mountain. We climbed the steep side 5 miles up and back. And I did that without any problem.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's a very difficult climb. And it was exhausting, but I did it. And then probably a week after that, I went to a athletic field and ran a half mile. And shot a selfie. Because it was just amazing what Jesus had done for me. And sent that to my son in New York. But so since then, you know, I've just been able to do all the things I used to do. And at work, you know, climb ladders and just, you know, I'm not supposed to be a working superintendent, but I do work, and, you know, it's all to the glory of God. And just,
Changed our lives.
It just totally changed our lives, and it's, you know, as we've said, the work has been done.
Yeah.
We have to, you know, I just realized I needed to accept the love that he had for me.
Yeah.
And that he had paid the price.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
That's it.
The doctors.
Oh yes, and
Oh, yeah.
before I'd gotten healed, I had an appointment with my surgeon a month and a half before, and so I went to see him, and so he, he gave me a checkup, and he said, well, this is, you're the same, you don't have, there's, no healing, potential. This is, same thing. You're
It's
gonna
only
just
gonna get
decline.
worse.
It's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that really concerned me was, as I got older, was I going to be, a
Crippled.
burden to my family, and have real trouble getting around. What was that going to be like? But so after I got healed, I went back to see him because I wanted to get an X-ray just to see
See if all the metal was
if
gone.
all the metal was gone. If he'd done it for this Muslim girl, then hey,
Yeah.
why not me?
Yeah.
And they said, well, why do you want an X-ray? I said, well, I'm just, things are different, and I'd like to get an X-ray. So they gave me an X-ray, and then I shared my testimony with the nurses, and several of them rejoiced with me. And then I shared the story with my surgeon. And at first he tried to explain it away, and I said, sir, this is not a gradual thing. I was just here a month and a half ago, and I went into this service in pain, and,
Came out without.
came out, well, after I got prayed for, I went out and ran for the first time in 6 years, and he said, well,
I can't
I
explain
can't
it.
explain it, and my wife said, well, we can. It was Jesus.
And he smiled.
And he smiled.
Yeah.
And so it's just,
He was glad
Yeah,
for you.
he was glad for
He
me.
couldn't explain it.
couldn't understand it
No.
because I think he was Hindu, probably.
That's all right.
Yeah.
He was very happy for
So
us.
he got to hear about the goodness of the Lord.
Yeah.
Mm.
And now you have two.
Anything else?
No?
We want to. There need to be a lot more stories like this.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because it's been done. It's already been paid for.
Yeah. It's just like our salvation.
Yeah.
The love he had for this, he's, he, what's the scripture?
I don't know what you're talking about yet.
For God so loved the world, even while we were yet sinners, he died for us.
Yeah.
And it's no different when it comes to healing. We didn't do anything to receive his forgiveness
No.
for our sins and to be saved. And it's the same thing with healing.
That's right.
It's
His goodness.
his goodness, and it's part of the children's bread
Wow.
to just
It's our
receive that.
inheritance. So yeah.
It's our inheritance.
We need to walk in it. And yeah.
Yeah.